International. Hello and welcome to the Nen Show Podcast. I'm your host, Craftsdwarf, here with my co-host, Mathwiz. Say hello, Mathwiz.
So it's not Ashita, Joe, it's International, Joe. That's the English title, right? Yeah.
Yes.
No.
Well, speaking of titles, apparently one of the localizations was like Rocky Joe, to like kind of like call attention to Rocky, you know?
Because Rocky was about boxing.
Though I think this actually predates Rocky, so yeah, I don't know. I'd have to check I don't remember exactly the year the movie came out, but it wouldn't surprise me. Alright, so, comments. Do you have comments?
Yes. There was a comment from Max Musterman talking about our point about the dead rival thing. And like, they brought up examples of like, oh, because this is kind of like that, but I'm like, it's not quite the same, because like for the examples that they brought up, it's like, oh, Zoro had Kuina, and there's like with it's different. The way I thought of it, like the example I had thought of would be like if we were reading Naruto and like instead of Sasuke going away at the end of part 1, like Sasuke died and then Naruto has to like go from there. Like that was like the vibe I got from like, oh my god, they killed off the main rival character. That's pretty big, especially considering like. And I like what this arc did with it, too, because, like, Rikishi really was kind of Joe's driving force throughout the story. So with him gone, it's like, well, where does the story go? And this whole stretch of chapters was really, like, dealing with that. And I liked how it was used.
Right. And, well, I guess also talking about Rikishi for a second, because Caribou-kun had a thread where he just mentioned things as he went through the discussion, which...
Yeah, so interesting that he would mention an interview online and didn't provide the source. Didn't link it.
Actually, that's a good point. I didn't think about that, but, he really should have.
Thanks for that one, Shabes.
Throwing some Shabes shade. Okay. Sorry. But, well, because on Rikishi, he mentioned one thing, and on my server there was a little bit more discussion from a guy on my server, Pablo, who knows a lot about Shounen, because he just kind of offhandedly mentioned that, like, Rikishi's death hadn't really happened in manga before, or something like that, in that, a well-liked character gets killed off, which was why, like, the funeral was so, I think he mentions, like, and I'd agree to my knowledge, the first of it, fictional character funeral like that. Because, like, characters getting killed off wasn't a thing that really happened, and, like, apparently the only other one around the time was in a manga called Star of Giants, but the character wasn't well-liked. And antagonists die all the time, of course, but that's different, like villains, I mean. But, so that was interesting. He had a few other comments, like, clarifying some things. Like, one thing was the Nishi punch, which the anime cut out, as, they tend to do, where, like, sometimes, like even Fairy Tail had moments where, like, it would kind of fix what mistakes in the manga, and I was thinking, like, while reading, like, was I nitpicking this? Because there were times where Joe was punching people in the head, but then it's like it wasn't a strong, forceful punch. He was lightly punched and then when it was commented on. So it was a bit of an inconsistency. So and yeah, he had some other things. Did you have any other comments? Because I did have one I wanted to respond to.
It might be the one I was thinking of.
Okanyakin.
Yes.
The long one? Yeah. Go ahead and say what you have to say, because I definitely have, because it's important to discuss, and, we might not have gotten across our exact perspective on it, but go on. Okay,
yeah. Well, because, like, my thought about it...
Which one? Because he had two comments. I'm assuming it's the one on that wasn't even really about Joe. It was about the...
Just contact sports in general?
Yes, people risking themselves for, sport.
Yeah, the thing I immediately thought of reading this comment was SB Nation, the YouTube channel, had made like a series of videos called Fighting in the Age of Loneliness. And it's like this whole perspective thing. UFC is kind of what they kind of frame it through, and they're looking at the history of that. And it kind of talking about like how it's this sort of like place for like outsiders or a chance to be like counterculture. And it's like, these people who can't really... like, you can't really do, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, not having a place kind of in general society, and so finding a way to do that, and it's very much, again, like, counterculture. It's not something that is, like, it's contrasted with, like, later developments in UFC as they kind of become more corporate and more, like, sensitized and more, like, trying to appeal to, like, be marketable and stuff, and it's like, well, that's not really, and kind of like how it loses the appeal of what it's supposed to kind of represent. And there are other things that I can't think of at the moment that have also kind of like touched on this idea of like outsiders finding their place in the world through whatever means they're able to. And this arc in particular definitely elaborates on that more in fun ways of Joe, and the same for Carlos when he comes in, and it's all tied back beautifully in the end when it's like, oh, it's just like when I found him on the streets in Venezuela. And so it's about like, you know, and also considering the comment that had been made, I think Joe himself had said like, oh, I probably would have become like a crime boss or whatever if I didn't have this. Yes. So it's like definitely a way of, you know, if not for boxing, what would Joe have? Would there be anything even remotely constructive that he'd be doing? So it was, you know, we did talk a lot about like the negatives of it last time and the potential dangers and the
which might
harmful
have,
side
overshadowed
effects.
like, right, with some of how we actually feel, but like, because I think, I do think it's important to like look at how media is treating the thing, and especially because there are like, because I agree with the fundamental point he's trying to make, and he says like at the end of the day you shouldn't tell someone what to do. Like he said that about in the middle of the post, and I agree. Like if someone, like in Joe's case, I have no right to stop him because, like, obviously, excluding that he's a fictional character, but just, like, this is what he wants to do. But also, like, there's something specific about Joe that also avoids kind of the issue I do have with, like, because he mentions at the end of the post, like, oh, yeah, there's this one MMA fighter who you can see him becoming gradually more brain-damaging fights, and it's sad, but is getting half a $500,000 every fight. So, and that's kind of where my issue is, because, like, it's not like a line. It's not a binary. Like, on some level, like, these people are fighting and risking themselves for something they want to do. Like, they wouldn't do it if they just, I hate boxing. But, if the monetary incentive is big enough, then, like, that stops being an issue for people, like, or, like, people are gonna put aside, so, like, let's put it this way. If there's suddenly no monetary money involved in MMA at all, like, how many MMA fighters would be left? Like, the ones who still really want to do it and have the time to do it, like, they'd still do it. But, like, on some level, like, how far is too far when you're paying people to hurt themselves? And that's the part that I think should be looked critically at, Yeah,
that was also, it's funny you bring that up, because, the video series I had mentioned, Fighting in the Age of Loneliness, it definitely talks about how people will kind of make the argument that, like, oh, these people get paid so much, so does it really matter? But, it talks about, like, how, like, oh, this is what, like, the big stars make, but here's how much they have to pay for all this, that, and everything else, and the medical expenses and whatever. Yeah. And there's obviously, like, a big difference, like, there's a big gap between, like, the filler fighters who are brought in to just, like, who aren't like the big household names versus the other, the more famous people.
Yes, and
sorry, that was just that was
how, like,
slightly related.
And yes, it is, because and even in Joe and Ippo they mention, like, oh, you can't just, unless you're like one of the top, like, title belt holders, you can't just live off of boxing. Like, you have to have another job. And, well, Joe himself, like, there's even a scene where he's, like, Yoko is giving him his payment, and she's giving him extra, and he's like, no. Like, he doesn't do it for the money at all. He kind of, like, he has a disdain for rich people. Like, he just gets what he, like, he's a person who, like, even if he wasn't getting a lot of money, he'd still be trying to box, Because, like, I do think at some point, like, like I said, you need to, like, because, you're right. Even if a person is harming themselves, I don't think you have a right to stop them. Like, it's not in line with, American law, but I think people should have a right to kill themselves if they don't want to live. Like, if they have a crippling illness or something like that just, like, I believe they should have the right to die. But, it should never be incentivized. Harming yourself should never be incentivized. Like, here's an example. The Guinness Book of World Records used to hold records for things like world's fattest person, like that. But then, like, I saw a story of a woman who was trying to beat that record. Like, that's horrible. Like, just for the fame of doing so, she's, like, killing herself by getting fat, becoming the fattest person. Like, that's not something that should be, like, awarded or celebrated or incentivized, So, like, again, like, these are boxers. This is different. This is people who are or fighters in football, even professional wrestling, which it's like an athletic, like, stage play, like, WWE is obviously what I'm referring to, when I say professional wrestling. But, like, they're still physical performers, even acting, like lots of things give you some level of harm, and some of these things can be, like can get you to stardom, and that's where that's where the incentivization comes in, and where like that it becomes a little bit more harder to distinguish, or trickier to like talk about, because it's like like some people just really want to do that, but what about the people who don't want to but are getting money for it and can't like that's where I go, well, this is kind of wrong,
Yeah, so it's basically like the response to this is kind of like, yes, it's not like all bad, and we don't want to completely throw the sport out, because like obviously there's an appeal to it, and there is like a valid reason that like the people participating in it would seek that out over anything else. But at the same time, that doesn't like completely absolve it from any potential negative things that could be critiqued or changed or whatever. Word
because like
you're looking for.
accidents happen. You can get horribly crippled in a wrestling ring or a boxing ring, or you could get horribly crippled because you have a bad fall at the retail job I work, and then the question's like, well, is it worth it, or is it worth that risk, but so there's always some level of risk involved, but again, it's like the incentive versus the risk. So like, and that's where that's just where like I said, I'm not saying it one way or the other, I'm just saying it should be viewed critically.
Yeah, this is a little getting slightly unrelated, but like on the topic of I remember there was a point of discourse a while back in the wrestling world about like the performers should have more like health benefits or whatever, like they're technically treated as like independent contractors, and there's like a whole thing there, and there are some people like within the industry who are like, well, if you want to go for the stardom, that's kind of the sacrifice you have to make, and it's like, well, like there's, so that's sort of like another example to carry across the point of like, just because this is what people are going for, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's like 100% support that and don't look at any of the circumstances surrounding it, I guess.
Yeah, I think like, just sitting, as an outsider, I think, well, like one, work-related injuries should be covered by, or health issues should be covered by the workplace. Like even after they leave, because even if you stop, wrestling or boxing, like you're still going to like, it's going to affect you for the rest of your life, like injuries and stuff. And then, the other thing I just thought of is like, why would you not want to protect your employees? Like, especially in a risky field like that. So, so yeah, it's just like, okay. Yeah, so anyway, but this is my, without looking too much into it. So anyway, I guess we should finally get to the discussion, or do we have any more comments?
Trying to think if there's anything else I had to say in response to that one specifically, because I don't know. I know I didn't have any other comments, but did I? No, I think that was it.
Okay. I mean, we could go on from, because like we talked a lot about last time about the what we know about the reality of, because like this manga, unlike it's just a sports title, and it's definitely like again stretches the reality, like we see in the Carlos fight. Anything that involves the ropes, I'm just like maybe that's a little much, but it is still like the most grounded series we've touched, I believe. So it's hard not to talk about reality.
I think the only other thing I might have had to say to that is, like I might have made a comment in the last episode of like, oh, it doesn't make me interested in checking out boxing. And that's not really like I don't like what these people are doing, but it's just like, it doesn't appeal to me personally, which is not to say that like, oh, it doesn't appeal to me, so nobody should do it. But it's just like, I'm not super interested in seeking out the sport itself. That's just me personally, though.
Yeah, well, because you are interested in wrestling, and that's also an activity in which they get hurt or even die in some cases. Like it's similarly risky, even if it's not a competitive sport. So it's not like that aspect of boxing is turning you off. It's just like it's just not interesting to you in general. Or is that accurate or?
Yeah, that basically sums it up.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, just to because and maybe because I
like a lot of what I'm interested in with like wrestling in particular, even though there is obviously like sporty elements to it, and there's like the whole in-ring stuff, and people can definitely get hurt doing it. But it's also like theatrical. It's stories. Right. It's the just presented through a different way. And it's not to say that like sports and boxing don't have narratives, but for me, I guess it's just easier to seek out narratives about that sport, because then I know what
there's a difference in like connecting to like very real people and how they present themselves and what they're doing versus connecting to a constructed story. So there's definitely a big difference in appeal. So
and it's definitely something like as far as like looking for stories and narratives. It's like once you're in the sport, you'll know the characters and everything. But like to just kind of watch it casually and try to get into it, it's just I don't know. It's definitely like an investment that I'm just not interested in making.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, Joe is back. Well, he thinks he's back. He gets his first match and he's. Like, see, and this is where it starts to get, like, he's punching people in the face. But, it's, he's not really, or he is, but he's not putting his all into it, so, the finishes are all body blows, so he becomes, starts getting this infamous name for himself. Again, he's risen back up, but, we'll see how long that lasts.
Yeah, I really liked the Messenger from Hell nickname. That was like, yeah.
The Grim Reaper. Yeah, and they kind of just gotta drive home, the fact that he killed Rikishi will always be remembered, basically. So he's just gotta continue to bear that.
Yeah, Joe racks up like a lot of nicknames over the course of the series, and it's kind of interesting seeing how many different variations of things end up coming up.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, then we get Yoko, who she wants to keep going with the gym, even though like she is constantly just like, oh well, you're just a woman, this is a man's world, and it's just like, and well, like, though I will say, like, maybe it's the manga showing its age of it, but she is more like adverse. Like, she's always the one who struggles like watching the boxing, like no other character has that issue. But she's the only, like major female character. So it's kind of like giving it to both sides, I guess. But also like, she's still a good character. I just think about that.
But when they called back to the prison thing later, I should say, when she like goes to get up and walk away and she's like, no, this is when I should be here. And it's like, character development.
Yes. So anyway, moving, the bunch of the because Joe keeps winning and he's like starting to take all these boxers, like there's a big meeting with the heads of the boxing gyms who like they're conspiring against Joe because like what, they're worried for their boxers. Oh no, a good boxer has entered the ring. How terrible. Like they're just a bunch of fucking cowards. Like I guess maybe it's because like Joe represents they're Danpei and Joe are very much like outsiders. Like they had to force their way into the association. They don't have all the great facilities and they're literally like the boxing bag is all stitched up so yeah, they're very much like outsiders. So I guess it's understandable like why they want to push against that. Like they're shitty for it, but I can kind of see why. And I love how Yoko's sort of like, oh, you didn't invite me. Isn't that sad? And then she like kind of, she's like, yeah, I'm just gonna raise a boxer that can actually beat Joe. Unlike you guys, maybe you guys shouldn't resort to childish trick. Like she just throws shade. She's great. Yoko's great. And then when Danpei comes in, like there's even a bit where the guy's like, oh, aren't you late? And he's like, what? I'm like 15 minutes early. And it's like, oh yeah. Like. He almost reveals the fact that they have a secret meeting. But one thing I did notice is like, because Danpei during this stretch, I feel like he's very much concerned for Joe, and like there's a few instances where that comes up, and I thought because like even after this he comes back with the news of the match, and he's not in a good mood. Like his star boxer is getting a chance to go up in the ranks, and but like. Well, because, like, one thing, mostly what I noticed is during the meeting, like, they got a bunch of reporters there when, like, they're about to tell Danpei about Joe's next match. Like, he can't, how's he just going to deny it? Like, with all the reporters there. Like, he's very much, I feel like they're very much, like, pressuring him to accept no matter what. You know? Like, they're basically, they're so conniving. But yeah, the plan is to have Joe against literally the champion of the bantamweight. I don't actually know how to pronounce it.
I've been pronouncing it bantamweight.
Oh, there's an N there. Yeah, bantamweight. Yeah, that's okay. I always forget the N. Yeah. Yeah, Joe's hyped up, and his energy is that like there's Nishi's like, oh, no need to be depressed. Like, yeah, he can. Like there maybe he'll manage, but oh boy, we'll get there. So yeah, Nishi has a match, and I do think Nishi's like arc is interesting. And because, like, as we kind of see here, like, oh, he's like, oh, my fist is fractured. and he basically has to retire from boxing. Like, because his body, like, yeah, he can't, you know, he's just, like, yeah, so, it's kind of interesting to see that as, like, an alternative. Like, he's just someone who, yeah, couldn't do it. His, you know, hands kept fracturing, like, you know, the tomorrow, like, but even then, like,
yeah, but even, yeah, like,
life,
him
right.
stepping away from boxing isn't him giving up on tomorrow. It's just, like, you know, like, him meeting Joe and, you know, getting into boxing, like, it kind of pushed him towards where he ends up going, even if, like, boxing wasn't the end destination. It led him, and it led him to where he would go, and he improved himself
through it. It's a very because you know, once you mention it, and like I have kept thinking about it more, but the detours message in Hunter x Hunter and Coach is something you've taken a lot from, and here you kind of see it with Nishi. Is like the working at the storefront was just a detour. It was just something he had to do to keep boxing, but now that's what he has, and like he's now this like refined man who's like an effective employee, a full-time employee. Like, he has a job, something he probably never would have envisioned himself having back in juvie. So, yeah, I just really like Nishi's like, you know, change and how his story kind of went, even if it like, yeah, it just doesn't involve boxing a lot anymore. Like, he still like is there supporting Joe, you know, even if he's not a boxer. But it's good.
I also think his like character design has kind of like whenever it changes, it tends to be like the most notable.
He's probably changed more than not only like physically, like design wise, like he probably goes through more transformations than not only anyone in Joe, but I'm struggling to think of characters who just change as much as him. Like his design is he almost looks like a completely different character, but he's still like distinctly Nishi. It's interesting.
Yeah, it was I definitely had like a reaction when he had been gone for a while and then he comes back after the stuff with Carlos or you know, partway through it, and you know, he's no longer a boxer and he's, you know, he's got the job, and I don't know, you could tell that he had put on more weight, but he didn't look like, I don't know, he looked like a guy who was very much like doing stuff in the world, you know, he was out there, he was making a living, he's a working man, he's a big boy. I don't know. I lost my train of thought.
He's not quite an athlete anymore. He's still fit, but you know, it's like right.
And he doesn't look like Rikishi anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely when he like came back in the story, I was like, "Oh, it's Nishi! I want that man to hold me in his arms."
Yeah, they'd probably be big and warm.
He looks like a big cozy boy.
Oh yeah, this is a fun little scene where we get Joe. They bring him to the other gym to train. I might have skipped some bits. Just like there was a little conversation with Noriko. There's definitely things to say about Noriko, but I think they'll be said next time, like when we finish the manga, basically. Like, because Noriko's been pretty. Though one thing I did want to say is that I feel like she finally, like, I don't know, she doesn't seem to look like Yoko like she did in her first appearance. So like. Like there was one, maybe it's also the eyebrows. Like I remember them being like thicker in one later panel. So like I don't know. I just had that feeling like and I'm like, oh, maybe you know, he was able to draw her in a way that didn't just look like Yoko, which even at the start, you know, she did for some reason.
Yeah, there was the one page where Yoko had like seen Noriko, and it was definitely like and then it was revealed that she was my sister the whole time. I don't know. But yeah, there's definitely been like an evolution in the design. Yep.
But anyway, Joe being Joe acts cocky and beats the shit out of a bunch of dudes. Like one of them, he doesn't even box. He just uses his feet because like at that point he's like, you know, like they brought him in to dissect him and have, you know, Tiger watch his future opponent. And there's even a part where he eggs on Tiger, which is kind of funny. Like, you want to go? And Tiger's like, oh, he could just get up, not even say a word. He's like, take off his coat. Like, yeah, okay. And, but that was vetoed. And then they all end up getting beaten up. So, well, you know, at least Joe can, you know, take what he dishes out. Anyway, then we get Joe versus Tiger. Oh, and this match is where, it really starts. Joe's, God. Joe dealing with Rikishi's ghost. Did you have any general thoughts on Joe versus Tiger?
I don't know if I really had much about the fight in particular.
Okay, because Well, because, like, I was kind of saying earlier about how, like, this is where Danpei is really starting to, I feel like, be afraid of the tomorrow. Like, he's the one who's always been, tomorrow. But now that he's, like, become so attached to Joe, and Joe's gotten, like, has shown so much potential, he's, like, he's worried for his, like, safety and stuff. Like, so, and this part I definitely disagree with him, because, like, so, you know, Joe, he starts, Tiger realizes that Joe won't attack his head, and then, you know, Danpei tells him in the middle of the fight, Joe, like, hey Joe, you have a crippling weakness. And then he throws in the fucking towel.
Yeah.
So that Joe doesn't even, and so, like, and that, like, because Joe's very much the kind of, he's similar to, like, Yusuke or Luffy, where, you know, they're characters who grow in the battle, you know, especially Yusuke, where it's, like, deliberately mentioned, or, you know, it's a common thing, you know. So, like, you know, Joe, you know, he knew his weakness, and maybe he would have found it if he kept fighting, but, you know, he never even got the chance to try because Danpei didn't let him, because he was worried, you know, and because he's like, oh yeah, that attack would have knocked you out. Well, we don't know, because he didn't get the chance to try, you know, so, like, you know, Danpei is very much, like, holding back in this instance for Joe's safety, and, but then, like, that's also, like, cutting off Joe the chance to, you know, because like, we saw, especially with the Aoyama fight, where if he doesn't know what if he's missing something, there's the possibility that he can find it in the middle of the match. But again, like, because of Danpei holding him back, he's not able to find that.
I do think it's also interesting in this stretch, how in the beginning of the series, Danpei was the one who pushed Joe into boxing. Danpei found this diamond in the rough, and he's like, oh, I'm gonna turn this guy into a pro boxer. I see his talent, and really, like, Danpei was hinging his tomorrow on Joe's tomorrow through the lens of boxing. But now he's not willing to follow through with the monster with the beast that he's created. He's like, oh, no, you can't go this far. This is, and I don't know. I just think it's an interesting role reversal, because there's definitely a degree to which later, when he's talking about Joe, like, potentially, like, getting into these life-threatening fights and really, like, just wasting away, and the multiple instances where they go their separate ways, or, like, they're pushed to really, like, splitting for good, and then eventually he does come back, because it's like, you know what, I got you into this, I'm going to follow you through to the end, which is kind of, I don't know, there's definitely, like, a gray moral thing there, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm. And what you sort of saying, like, what you made me think of was how, like Danpei, like, yeah, he is older and more experienced, generally speaking, but, like, again, this is new for him, having this, like, yeah, it's a diamond, but a diamond that it gets hit with a hammer is still gonna get crushed. Like, he's afraid, you know, for Joe, but he's also, like, inexperienced. Like, he's not, like, yeah, he's like, oh, you could become a great boxer. Like, he did recognize that potential, but he's also, like, you know, he hadn't quite reconciled that, like, what does it mean to be a boxer? And that, that means fighting in these, like, health and life risking bouts, you know, like, even with Rikishi, he didn't quite set in with him because, well, maybe Rikishi was the reason for that, actually, now I think about it. Because, like, yeah, Joe killed Rikishi, and now, like, you know, the death that, like, because, yeah, there was this other death that happened that they referenced, like, or I think that was a real one that happened. Yeah, no, it was. And, but now the reality of that has set in with Danpei, so he doesn't want Joe to be Rikishi, basically. And that's very much something that can happen. And so that's that. I hadn't thought about, like, how that. So I'd been thinking a lot about how Rikishi's death affected Joe, but I hadn't thought about it affecting Danpei. And, you know, so, but here it is. Like, here's Danpei not wanting Joe to become another Rikishi, and like, so it like, you know, I still disagree with him, you know, at least on a thematic, or the series disagrees with him on a thematic perspective, and, you know, and Joe's, like I said, a character who wants to box, but you know, I understand him a bit better now that I think about it.
Yeah, so there's definitely, when he's the one in the position telling Joe these things about all the dangers being posed to him and whatever, and, oh, don't do this, it doesn't sound just like, oh, I'm your advisor, I know what's best for you, because he's like, well, there's a degree to which, like, he was the one who kind of pushed Joe into this, so we're not, like, 100% primed to, like, trust him as, like, the moral epicenter or anything.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, like, they're both flawed, so it's, you know, which, you know, Joe's pretty good about, like, there's no one is like no one's perfect at all. Like even Rikishi like maybe Rikishi's the most perfect, but even that, like he's satisfied, but he dies satisfied. So like yeah, Joe's good about that. Oh, that actually reminded me of something I forgot to say last time because I thought about it after the discussion. The moment where Joe stops the punch, or not Joe, Rikishi stops the punch with the bell. I thought about that because that was interesting. Because like again, I even say like that might have been something that would have ended the fight. But Yoko, because remember Yoko when she was gonna give him the water and said like you don't have I would be glad if you drank the water because that would mean that you're human just like the rest of us. You have flaws. You're not perfect. Rikishi stopping with the bell was very perfect. And so that's just another thing that I realized. Yeah, it's his perfection. Him being the perfect boxer. Kind of, you could almost say like was the reason he passed, like satisfied, but not dead. So it's like and I thought about that later, and I was like, oh, that's good. Like, so a little off topic, but still interesting. But anyway, Joe, he may have lost against Tiger, but he's given a second chance to fight against like instead of the title holder now the number 1 ranked boxer, and so now we see Joe trying to sort of make up for his trying to overcome his weakness. Like there's a part where Tiger even tells his second opponent that he won't hit you in the head. Oh yeah, okay, it was this fight. This one has the really striking 2-page spread where Joe hits him in the head. Like he starts like forcing himself to like hit him in the head really strongly, and it triggers his trauma, and he throws up, and it's brutal. Anyway, there's a scene where Noriko like basically begs Dampé to make him stop boxing, and he kind of admits like maybe it's time to close up the gym since Nishi can't box. Joe's continually his nosedive, but no, Joe's not going to give up because like it's the only thing he has, and he likes it, so like he does want to overcome this. Like he's still running, he's still punching, he's wants another fight. Though it is kind of sad because like he's still trying to go for his tomorrow, but like there's the town is no longer like, oh man, it's so sad. First he loses to the title holder, now he's gonna then number 1, now he's gonna fight number 2, like, and the kids of course get all defensive about it, but they're just like, oh man, Joe, he's kind of like, which is I guess almost sad, like that they like they're not behind him no matter what. And of course like Joe frames it where it's like they're like, hey, you should stop boxing, and he's like, well, I'm still fighting Rikishi. Like he can't let go of that rivalry, of course, because I mean, I guess it goes back to like what happened last time, where if Joe leaves the ring, then he's abandoning Rikishi, kind of like Rikishi died, so he's was Wolf also mentioned, I feel like, because he took Wolf's future in boxing away too. So oh no, I bet you loved Carlos's introduction or his introduction into every single scene. Basically.
Well, I do think it ties back in later with some of the stuff that happens and some lines that get mentioned and his general dynamic with Joe and how like boxing and stuff plays into it. But the introduction, he's definitely definitely like the playboy, the hyper acting. Well, not hyper acting, but like he acts a lot.
He's definitely leaning. Like
the words I happened to pair together there had a different implication.
But he's maybe leaning into some stereotypes, but
that was kind of my thought.
Yeah, I do like Carlos overall, but at the same, like, well, the one thing, I don't know if this is an art thing or if this was I want to say it's more likely a scan thing.
Yeah, but, that's what I was thinking too. That like sometimes you just can't see the expressions on his face because the scan
right, like
is
you
so
see
dark.
like his eyes and smile, Carlos, so I can see like that kind of thing. Like it definitely gets better later, but there, especially when he first shows up, it's just like I can't see you, Carlos.
But yeah, it definitely does stop becoming a problem later because I don't know. There's just more you can see. The scan quality is a bit, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I also do like the scene where he go say hello to the higher ranked boxer, and he's like, oh hey Joe, good luck on your fight, and no, the other guy, and it's Carlos is like, that's never happened before.
Yeah, that was really good. It's like it really drops that hint that like Joe, he's struggling, but he's still there. He's still in there somewhere.
He's right. He's still got the shine in his eyes, that desire for tomorrow. But anyway, the fight, the fight's pretty short. Joe throws up again. Like I think it's mentioned, like, oh, the ring's stained in blood and vomit and trash, and it's just a complete affront. And fouls. That's right, because Joe just loses it. Though I thought about this because vomiting really dehydrates you, like, because you use a lot of the liquid in your body to vomit, and he still kept fighting, and I'm like, God, Joe, stop! So just something that came to mind, but just another moment on his steady descent as he's trying to overcome, but failing, because he's definitely missing something, and we see what he's missing, because he's focused so much on Rikishi that we'll talk about how that gets resolved.
There's also during the fight, there's the cutaway where it's another scene where Yoko is leaving the fight, but this time it's not because of like, oh, it's so sad or it's so violent or whatever. It's like, this is pathetic. Like, this is not the Joe Yabuki that is, the wild Joe, the wild animal. This is this is the fallen Joe. They're like, who this is tough to watch, not because like it's violent and adrenaline filled and like, Joe putting his life on the line. It's tragic, and it's I hadn't thought about that because I did notice that she left, but it wasn't this. I didn't think about like because she's become strong enough to leave in this, like in a sense where before she was trying to leave because she was weak, and you could say where she's familiar enough with boxing and Joe that she's just disappointed. So yeah. One thing I also, at least I think, I'm not 100% sure because I forgot to go back and check the page, but when Joe says he's seen, what's his name? The manager guy. Starts with an R.
Oh, Robert.
Robert, that's right. Joe says that he makes a comment like, oh, I've seen him before. And I'm wondering, was he the guy that Yoko was dancing with that one time when Joe found them at the party? And I was like, hey, it's this guy who looks like Rikishi. And it's Yoko, who I wasn't sure was Yoko.
I don't think so, but if so, that's wild. But because I think it's mentioned that he recognizes him from like, maybe because like he's been on like papers and news, because he's okay. He's a notable manager. And he's also he's pretty distinctive, especially in Japan where he's like a foreigner. But that was my takeaway. But I didn't think about that because if so, that that it would make sense. But I mean, maybe it's a bit weird for Yoko to be already planning that while Joe's like out of it. Because that's the whole thing. Like this whole stretch of chapters is Yoko being Aizen and just like master planning it. Because she's great.
Yeah, because like as soon as Robert and Carlos show up, I'm just like, did she do all this so Joe could get his mojo back? Like, was that his mojo?
Well, and it's so funny, like last time, because she's like, man, you guys are so obsessed about Joe. And here she is, like, spending like 5 volumes getting Joe back on his feet after Rikishi's death by like bringing in another box. I mean, not that Carlos doesn't also get something out of it, but that's part of why her plan is able to work. But anyway, since the professional ring has basically discarded Joe, he decides to go into underground boxing. Also, there's this interesting. I don't know if you noticed it or felt this way, because after he says that, like I think that's like the end of the chapter, and then it starts the next chapter, and there's like an established shot of the gym, and then there's the light bulb hanging, and I don't know if you recognize the image, but like there's like the cable or whatever's holding it up. And the way that it's like tied kind of resembles a noose, and that made me think of like, because it's like by going into this out, like he's ultimately he wants to get over himself, but also he's going to like it's very much like an abyss for boxers. Like it's not like it's the wrong boxing, kind of is. I think he's the narration or just some characters say lines like that, like this isn't where it's not the real boxing. Like they're not trying to improve themselves. Like there's fixed fights and stuff. Like it's not. Like, even at the last fight Joe does there, is the guy is even saying, he's trying to help Joe leave. And so I thought about that while we're reading this and see this. Like I said, noose imagery. Like, it's almost like a suicide for a boxer to go there, like their career suicide in a sense, like because they're just giving up on the real boxing almost. So I don't know. I'm thinking a lot about this one panel.
Yeah, and it's definitely like a similar to when we had kind of gotten the Wolf cameo about about people who have. They're no longer striving for tomorrow. They're stuck in yesterday. They're relying on their, their reputation. And so
right.
people are, looking to see like, oh, it's the famed Killer Joe. We get to see him at this local thing. Yeah, so it's definitely, it's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, then we get Carlos's first fight. I like his second one, or I think maybe it's the second, this one's just like, oh, he's clumsy, he's a goofball, and then I got a lucky punch. Again, the acting where he's just like, no one will fight him, so he has to like do this so that they can actually box, which is it's sad because he's too good. Anyway, and then we see Joe, and he's refusing to fight because he wants a real fight. But the fight doesn't happen anyway because of the rain, so he just watches Carlos's fight, and he's starting to get into it. Like, wow, this guy's good because he sees the hidden elbows. I also like the pages where like Carlos just like destroys him because like there's a lot of like blank panels, which is interesting. Like, and then or just panels with just blood stains in them.
Yeah. And
then some reaction shots. Like it's kind of it's like an alternate take on the kind of Rikishi bit that I talked a lot about last time, but it's I don't know, it's interesting to think about like to portray it this way because like blank panels like that I don't see often, and then multiple in a row like that. So
I guess that must mean it has bad art.
Man, didn't even draw it, lazy Chiba.
Bleach is bad because it didn't draw backgrounds, but imagine people nowadays, if Ashita Joe was published in 2020, people would be freaking out, empty panels. Clearly, it's just lit. Okay, joke's gone far enough.
But yeah, Joe finally, like, now that he's thinking about Carlos, like, and this is, he finally gets what he's missing in regards to, like, overcoming his trauma with Rikishi, because, like, he knows he has to, like, defeat Rikishi by being able to fight again as a, real boxer, but, like, now he's got another kind of rival. In Carlos, someone else, like now someone he wants to defeat and overcome, and like there's even the part where he does like, I'm gonna beat Tiger in 1 round in less than 1 minute, and Joe's like, well shit, Rikishi did that exact same thing, and he's just that's when he like can't get Carlos out of his head because it's just like it's almost like Rikishi's back in a sense.
Yeah, I'm also looking back on these. Just the general interactions between the people like not wanting to fight Carlos because they're like, oh no, we're gonna get slaughtered, and just like the savagery from Yoko's response is like, whether or not your precious boxer is slaughtered is dependent upon his skills and your ability to train him, is it not? And it's just like, ooh, the shade.
Yeah, no. I love Smell Yoko is great. Well, especially because like she knows that they kind of like condescend towards her as a woman, so when she's able to like flip it and like, because she's like, that's the thing is like she is a woman, and in some ways she is a bit like soft-hearted, but she's also grown up in that regard, and also like she's like one of the most, she's like basically she's the most intelligent character in the series, and she's just very she's sharp, and like when she's got jabs like that, like she's an intelligent lady.
Yeah, and like even though there are like multiple times where people talk about like, oh, a woman owning a boxing gym, isn't that kind of weird? Or you stay in this business too long and you'll like, oh, a woman shouldn't try to get involved in a man's business, but like yet she still hasn't left, like she's still doing her thing. Like even though these things keep getting brought up, it's not like she hasn't confirmed any of that yet. Like she's still pushing forward for tomorrow. I don't know. That's not really connected, but or maybe it kind of is.
Yeah, but because she's not a trainer. She doesn't know how to, like, she's not a coach, but she's still like able to like organize these matches and promote, like, she's got the business sense for it. like because otherwise these matches with Carlos wouldn't have happened, even if there was some manipulation going on. But hey, Carlos needed one of those matches too, because you can't fight otherwise. Also, I like the interaction with the there's the guy just driving along and the kids like pretend that to get hit and they're just trying to scam him basically, and Nishi comes along. It's just a fun interaction because he's like, the kids get run over all the time. It's one of the mysteries around here.
Yeah.
Like, it's just funny. Oh, okay. I like this fight between Joe's last one in the underground boxing ring against Inaba, I think is his name. Was that it? Yes,
Yeah.
Inaba. Did you have thoughts on this one first, or because I liked it?
Yeah, I mean, if I think of anything, it'll come to me.
Okay. Well, I just like how, because Inaba, he's also a washed up boxer, but he reminds me of the gangster, the guy who beat up Wolf, where he recognizes Joe, and because he doesn't even want to fight because until he gets it reframed as like, someone needs to wake Joe up, and he's like, yeah, I can wake Joe up. And, he does it not in a way like, fight me. He goes like, you don't belong here. Your sights are set much higher. Like, go, like, I just really like that, where he's like, yeah, he's fighting Joe, but he wants to push Joe. And he's just a bro. And after the fight where he gets like his ass beat and Joe's like, yeah, I'm just gonna leave. He just walks out of the fucking ring mid-match because of course he does.
Yeah, and everybody's like, where are you going? And Inaba's like, hey, this is a man who's just set off on a new path of life. We should wish him good luck. And everyone's like, what?
He waves a stool around like, cheer for him, damn you! Like, put some energy in it. Like, I love him. He's so funny. Like, he's threatening these people into being positive for Joe, and he's such a good one-off character. Or not one-off, but he's a short-lived character in comparison. I just like, you're cool.
The ultimate shonen jobber.
Yeah. There's another one for your jobber video, Inaba. Oh wait, you already made it. So it hasn't happened yet. I just thought about it, so I'm gonna bring it up because the Carlos hitting on girls is a little, but I can't hate the one I think where he kisses Yoko on the cheek. Because, it's still him being the same, but the fact that Yoko gets so flustered about it and blushes, it's unusual to see her in that state, so I can't help but, okay, that's funny. Just to see, I don't know, but it a little bit, so, I don't know, I'm bad, but
I don't know, for me, it's kind of funny, because that was the only one where I was like,
because it's Yoko, and you don't want to see her, because is she still your favorite character? I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I'm thinking she might end up taking that spot. I mean, she's definitely up there, but I mean, we'll see where the arc goes.
Is she your aesthetic character?
No,
or is that Nishi?
I don't know if there's really any aesthetic characters in this series. I'm sorry.
No. That's too. Well, we'll see. It's Soul Eater was we didn't talk about your aesthetic character in Soul Eater, but as you described it to me later, it was the whole thing is just your aesthetic. So how do you pick out one? Right. Sad that Rave Master has more aesthetic characters than Soul Eater or Joe.
Well, the thing with that scene, when it's just random characters, I'm like, I don't have any investment in these people. So I mean, it's
it's kind of shitty, but
it's kind of stereotyping. It's kind of kind of womanizing, but it's whatever. But when it's Yoko, who has a pretty strong presence in the story, and it's it's definitely a joke. So it's not this is not in any way a major point against, or even a minor. It's not even a point against it. It's just a casual observation where my gut reaction is kind of just
No, yeah, I actually right, I think we talked about it a lot with Sanji, where it's I don't think it's great, but sometimes I find myself laughing or my lips twitch a bit, not maybe not laughing, but I chortle a little, And again, that was just, I don't know, I don't know.
It's
again,
one of those minor things where sometimes when you're reading stories, if I'm going to make a video on something, obviously a moment like that is never going to come up because that's not important enough for me to address. But since we're discussing things and things like this will come up, it's I might mention it here because it's just a casual conversation about the reading.
Yeah, and I guess and what we take from it is two different, because you. It's your favorite character who, victimize is probably a really harsh word for it, but,
it's definitely not a word I would use, but it's definitely, at her
closer
expense,
to how you're
guess.
feeling than, how I'm feeling, where it's she's being, but, for me, I like
I get where you're coming from, because like I had said, like it's kind of at her expense. It's like catching her off guard, and she's very much someone who's like very uptight
Reserved
and is very much like in control of like what's going on and how she presents herself. And a lot of the fun of her character is when Joe is like taking her down a peg or like breaking the facade or whatever. And so like I can definitely see from that angle, why is there a motorcycle driving by? Still, I feel like there's just like a motorcyclist just like cycling the block, and I don't know what's happening.
Oh boy, that's weird. Yeah, okay, if it's like they keep going around, like, because that's just like I have loud cars going by my window every other hour or so, but circling, that's weird. But what was I gonna say? I was gonna say something. Because again, I just generally like it. Like I like seeing the parts of characters that you don't often see, I guess. Like I also remember in Ojamajo Doremi when Aiko looks girly. Normally she has like her overalls, she's more tomboyish, but when she's girly, like you were like, oh, it's wrong. I think what was your reaction? Yeah, but I was like, oh my god,
it is
adorable.
Still cute. Yeah, it's like something different. It's putting the character in like a different scenario.
Right. So in this case with Yoko being flustered and blushing, like that's not a normal. I like blushing in general. Like
we have already spent more time talking about the little scene than I ever paid it any thought.
Damn it. Well, because I guess I'm also talking about like our individual tastes and stuff too.
I do think it's an interesting point that you are pursuing.
And it hasn't even happened yet. We haven't even gotten there. I just like saw Carlos and Yoko together and thought about it because that was like later. All right, let's move on. That sounds like a signal to move on. So yeah, Joe goes to Yoko's place. I love how like out of place Joe always is with Yoko, because he's just like he's basically above a homeless person. Like he does have a home, but he's always in dirty clothes. He's always beat up. Like and of course she's the rich girl, so like they're just from completely different worlds, and but in spite of that they still have similarities. So they're good. But anyway, Joe wants to spar with Carlos. He wants to fight. That's his goal now. Oh yeah, and then we get I think you kind of brought it before, but the scene with Dampé being or just in general. Well, we talked about Dampé a lot, but he's afraid of Carlos, like because he doesn't want Joe beaten up, but Joe doesn't care. He's here to fight. He's starting to overcome himself. So. And here's what Carlos is he's still like laughing and is like, man, you Japanese are so dramatic, like. Just sort of poking fun at the manga in a sense, but also like being a dick.
Well, yeah, and it's also kind of interesting from his perspective, because he's the one acting all dramatic and like putting on the performances to trick everybody. So it's kind of like I don't know. It's definitely like you're one funny, to talk, mister.
Yeah, because I mean they're doing it like they're legit being dramatic. Like it's just natural to them.
Yeah.
Where with Carlos, it's a performance, but it's and then we get the cross counter moment that Carlos is being jokey and stuff. Then Joe pulls off the cross counter, and that's big, both for two reasons. One is because like it makes Carlos take him seriously. But that fact is also like they're wearing headgear, but like Joe pulled off a strong punch on Carlos's head, and like this is basically where he's like overcome his trauma, more or less, he's made a major step on it.
Yeah, and I felt like it being a strong punch to the head, obviously it was the big thing, but like the fact that it was the cross counter, which is like it was Joe's specialty for the longest time, like that's how he would finish people off, and so the fact that he's able to really like go back to his roots, and that's the way that he like breaks out of his trauma. It's
yes. Like, I just realized, like, again,
but
how
also,
Joe's fighting style kind of fits with what did you have to finish the thought?
Sorry, yeah, because, like, it's like, it's the cross counter, but it's also, like, a new spin on it, the fact, like, he's bouncing off the rope, so it's, like, they're reinventing the wheel, so to speak.
Oh, that's good, yes. Well, because I was point, because, like, him doing the stomach blows was, like, it's him... he's both, like, he can't hit in the head, but he's also kind of, like, he's avoiding... going towards, because as a boxer he has to hit the people in the head, like, or at least he can't only do one and not the other, like, but so by going for the stomach, he's avoiding that, like he's literally like not going towards, he's stuck So it's just like real fit, it's fitting in a couple ways, but like now they can do the cross. Yeah, and I love how you framed it, where it's like he's not only going back to his roots, but he's also reinventing himself. So he's not only found his old self, but he's also found a new self.
He's not just looking to the past, but he's looking to the past to better confront tomorrow. Hey, roll credits. Tomorrow's Joe is back.
See, I read this, like, this is what, my third time reading it, and I hadn't considered, like, how to read his fighting style into it, like, because usually, like, when I do that, I do it with, like, superpowers, and there's usually, like, something very, like, direct, like Luffy, he's a resilient character, so he's rubber, he bounces back, like, that kind of thing. Like, it's hard not to read something into that, but here it's everyone boxes, but there's little, like, differences in how their characters fight and stuff that you can kind of read into. Like, I guess you could say Rikishi, he uses uppercuts. Maybe that's because he's trying to punch upwards and get, because he wanted to be at the top, I don't know, maybe that's a little far, but, it's interesting to consider.
Yeah, because for an uppercut, you have to swing down to swing up, and so Rikishi was punching down to Joe so he could punch up to the... I don't know.
Okay. Maybe I don't... Okay, no, it's fine. I also like seeing Carlos get serious. Because he's usually so showboaty, and like he's very similar to both Joe and Rikishi, like, because it's mentioned like, oh, he's from the slums like Joe, but then his personality like has Rikishi similarities, like he very much like he foils both of them really well, I think. And because I was just about to mention his showboatiness and how he has this, like, it's not like a cocky showboatiness where Joe's like, yeah, I'm great, I'm the best. And where Carlos is more like, oh no, I had a lucky punch. So, like but that's the fake Carlos. He's underneath it. He's a very confident boxer. So, but him losing the showboatiness, because Joe also has that showboatiness, and then he gets serious, and then this happens here in the sparring match with Carlos after the cross counter. He gets serious, and quiet. Okay, and I love this exchange that happens after the sparring match, because sorry, vehicle. So Yoko's like, I should pay you for, helping, my boxer to spar. And Joe's like, I got a lot of that. I should be paying you. And Yoko understands Joe so well. She's like, I knew you'd say something like that, so I decided to pay you in tickets. And it's like, well, Yoko's good. Okay. Oh, and then we get Carlos' second match. And of course the post-mortem where Joe breaks down what he did. I like this one. Did you have any thoughts on it specifically?
If you talk and I think of something.
Okay, yeah. So, because I like the way Carlos is a fucking wizard, because he punches he punches him in a way in such a specific way at a specific time. He goes to his seat and he's knocked out, and just the way I don't know, it's just what? How is this it's just Carlos is for a guy who's not even trying, the build up to him being really strong is great.
Yeah, because when he strikes, he has the precision, and he's strong enough and precise enough to hit one blow and make it count for the entire match. And that's pretty terrifying.
Right, there's just a swimming pool of Japan, and they just threw a fucking shark into it, but he's pretending to be a guppy, and he's really good at it. Because I just love it's just oh yeah, he did a specific thing and hit the chin, and like you said, the precision. It's just I like it.
Yeah, and it's also, in the ring, the precision, but also, the fact that he's oh, okay, this is the plan, we're going to get to this point, and we're going to do this move, and it's going to play out in the way that, we're going to politic our way into this, because, oh, they want to save their boxer's reputation, so they're just going to make it look like a fluke, not the fact that he's actually knocked out cold. So it's, obscuring what actually happened in a way that, he's, manipulating people while also being super precise with his boxing.
I think I forgot about that part, which is why I was struggling to think of why do I like this? I know I like it, but how do I explain it? Yeah, no, because that's also part, because he's not just a wizard in the ring, but like you said, he's manipulating things outside the ring because he even says I'll knock him out in round 4, because 4 death. But then he right, yeah, he sets up in a way so that he can get his actual match against the bantamweight champion. Because if he goes too hard, then Tiger's gonna be afraid of him. So
I wonder if this was the example, because I remember in the last time I had brought up, like, people getting, like, knocked out, like, wrestlers getting knocked out and, like, still finishing a match. And I thought you had said, I don't remember if you had said something, but, like, when he got knocked out, when the boxer got knocked out and, like, still made it over to his chair, and he's like, oh, I remember getting hit, and that I don't remember anything after that. It just seemed like, I forget if you mentioned that before, but it made me think of our conversation last time.
Yeah, well, because there's something like that happened in Ippo too, and so
that's probably what you mentioned.
Real life, and so I can see it happening. It's on some level, because I think we were talking about it, during like the Rikishi fight, because we were trying to say like, oh, after this point was he gone, basically already, and but he did have dialogue after that, so it's kind of that's where we were talking about it, I think, because here he had this like he was knocked out, but he had this movement after that, so and like I said, of course, I was thinking of a similar.
You were thinking of an Ippo example, but I had thought it was
not quite right. Yeah. Oh, I see. No, I hadn't thought about this one, but this is it fits that. So, okay. I love this interaction. So they go to Carlos's match, which is like what's no one's even there. But I love this. Another Yoko, Joe and Joko are just, or Yo and Joko. Did I really just say that? Did I mix up their or combine their names? Joe and Yoko. Sorry.
I can't believe Craftsdwarf is a Joko shipper. Going home, logging off forever.
I mean, you're not wrong. I mean, what? No, but I like the interaction where, like, because they go to their normal seats and they're like, oh, hey, look, Yoko's all the way up there. And Yoko, like, arranges for them to come closer. And he's like, no, thank you. No need for your concerns. If we'll move closer to the ring if we feel like it. And then, like, literally 3 seconds later, let's go closer. Like...
Yeah, so it's like, oh, if you're going to invite me down there, I'm not going to go. I'm going to go on my terms.
Exactly.
Okay, I feel like it. Let's go.
She's trying to like show that she's, or even in indirect, like she's, even indirectly, she's showing that she has this power. But Joe's subverting that power and just rules in general. Like he's doing what she wants, but on his own terms.
This is basically an interaction from Kaguya-sama Love is War.
Basically,
I don't know. Yeah. I was gonna say, have you seen that?
I just finished season 2 yesterday.
Oh, okay.
So yeah.
But it's like, no, you can't be in control. I have to be in control.
Right. Because I like I said, I just like the way they play off each other. Anyway, then we get Carlos versus Tiger Ozaki, which is over in one punch. 16
seconds.
God, it's so like all this build up and then just a great payoff.
It's also there's a bit of, I don't know if dramatic irony is the word I'm looking for, but it's like, oh, it's a big. Well, it's not a title match, but it's like the champion of Japan versus, there's a lot potentially riding on the fight that you could like advertise, but like barely anybody shows up. And this is where the tiger bears his fangs. This is where the big reveal, the shoe drops, but nobody's around to see it.
Yep. And it's just one punch. And Carlos explains his his issue, and Yoko, they talk about how no one's willing to fight him, so he had to do the showboating, and here's how strong he really is. Like, is that they even call him the uncrowned emperor because, he's the 6th best bantamweight boxer in the world, but no one above him will fight him. So they're like, he might, they're afraid. And then of course he talks about his dream where he just wants a good fight, or what does he say? A fight in a pine scented ring is exactly what it says. Which I don't know what significance that has, or is it a symbolism thing? I don't know, it's pretty specific, but he basically just wants a real fight, which so few people can give him. Which of course Joe's like, hey, I'm over here, I'm right here. You want to fight?
I'm also not 100% certain if this is like the actual line that was said, or if it just happened to be like a coincidence in the translation. But when Yoko first sets up Carlos's fight with like the number 2 boxer. At the very end of that interaction, she has a line where she's like, "It's time to cast the die for my grand gamble." And then when Joe finally confronts Carlos to set up their exhibition match, he has the line where it's like, "In any case, the die is cast." And so I'm like, is that intentional? Like, is there supposed to be a parallel there?
See, I'm actually because
it's also accompanied by a panel where he's like, I'm getting the feeling that you planned for all of this regardless of what I wanted, and it's just like a close up on her face and then a close up on her eye, and I'm like, is this intentional? Was that supposed to like indicate through the dialogue that like this is exactly what she was planning for?
And also again that there's similarities. Well, I will say that like the die is cast. That is a well-known. It's like a line, like a reference to, I think, like let me just look it up because I know it's not a media. It's actually like a alleged real thing that someone is. I can't remember. I know the die is cast. Latin phrase. Okay, it's attributed to Julius Caesar. I believe involving a conflict in which. Have you ever heard the phrase "crossing the Rubicon"?
No.
It's a river? Okay. Well, because I've seen, not only have I seen, just like, I feel like this is a reference to, or both these lines are a reference to that line, but also, I've also seen it recently in both Hidamari Sketch and, Bleach, which are like two series I don't know if you could go more different than. Because, in Bleach it was when Uryu Ishida was doing like in the first arc, the Substitute Soul Reaper, when he used the bait to call the hollows, he was trying to do, it's like a point of no return is what the crossing the Rubicon is, and
okay.
Allegedly when this happened, he said the die is cast, like because once you throw the die, you can't stop it's rolled. It's gonna roll a 1 or it's gonna roll a 6, something. So
unless it rolls under the couch and you can't see it, but that's irrelevant. Man,
Mathwiz, you must have been playing Dungeons and Dragons if you are just like because that's been there, done that. I don't know why I thought that, but no. So it's like it's something. It's reasonable that they both it's a turn of phrase that they both might have heard somewhere, but the fact that they're both saying it and they picked up that, like, again, I do think it's meant to highlight them as similar, and, because I did think that line when Yoko said it, but I didn't think about it again later when Joe said it. Maybe I glossed over it, but, that's good. Oh yeah, I guess I was focused more on because, Joe mentions that, Carlos fought the 3 opponents that Joe lost to before he left, and then he's like, I get the feeling that you planned for all of this, regardless of what I wanted. And Yoko's just like, she's got her slight smile. She's also sweating a lot. And yeah, then he says the die is cast. So I think I was focused more on that than the die line. But no, that's a good catch. Because I hadn't noticed that they both said it. Because that now that the exhibition match is set, like Joe says, the die is cast. All I can do is prepare. Oh, I like the scene where Joe goes to see Carlos sparring, and he starts throwing peanuts, and Carlos just he's dodging them. But I love when he does get beans Carlos, and then Carlos's face, he's just like, this motherfucker. Like, he just gets serious because he's like just got a cocky expression. He dodges all the peanuts, like, oh, I could take anything you can throw at me, until he can't, and then it's like, okay, let's fucking go right here. Like, it's just a really striking expression. Because the way the lighting is and his eyes, and like I said, I like seeing Carlos get serious after he's such, normally such a joker. Anyway, there's more strategy talk with again, more mystery. Like, we see Joe's counter to because, Joe's got his kangaroo punch, Carlos is going to try this, so Joe has to come up with a, counter, and he does it against Stompe, but we don't see it, just more of the mystery element. Suspense maybe is a better word to it, rather than mystery. And then we get the exhibition match.
Oh, definitely. Leading. Wait.
Go. Yeah, go on.
Okay, well, definitely like leading up to the exhibit. Or do I have my? Am I mixed up here? Okay, yeah, leading up to the exhibition match. There's like a one-off line of dialogue from like a random side character, which maybe isn't supposed to mean anything. But me, I'm like, this. Why is this in the story if it doesn't mean anything? Surely, but. It's played off as like a joke. It's just like some old lady, and she's. They talk about like, oh, Joe looks like he's real fired up for this, and she's like, maybe he's in love, and it's like, what? And then she has like a comment about like, well, if I were 10 years younger, but like the comment, it seemed this is where I thought that like, Carlos's like playboy nature kind of like factored into like maybe like a theme of the arc or whatever.
Okay.
because like, you know, when Carlos comes back and he has, you know, he brings back, he's a very like, you know, with like the womanizing thing, you definitely think he's a very passionate guy. He's this, that, and everything else, which is just fancy fluff talk for I don't have words to say. But so like for Joe, you know, this guy comes in and Joe like gets his passion for boxing back through seeing the mystique of this boxer, and then he gets to fight him, and the way that they just go all out against each other like wild animals definitely does seem like you know, obviously not like Joe is in love with Carlos, but like you know, the fact that like there's something there about like the love for boxing or whatever it is, you know, kind of like how okay, well I guess with Dressrosa it's a little more on the nose about like love being crucial to the arc, but like I kind of got that feeling here where like maybe there's something involved.
No, well, I was gonna say like, man, if this series is just, you know, gonna inject homoerotic subtext, then it's way more ahead of its time than I thought. Because like I just randomly thought of I haven't seen it yet. Char's Counterattack, which is a Gundam film that you know, I don't know. I think it takes place after like the third year long TV Gundam series. I might be wrong, but apparently the Tomino director said add as much homoerotic subtext as possible, because like I don't, you know, Gundam had a lot of popularity with women who like the characters, and
as much as possible.
Right. So
I admire
and, you know,
that.
Like,
I respect the
right,
hustle.
So, you know, on some level, like especially with like you know, the Fujoshi market and how series like Bleach or Inuyasha or Rurouni Kenshin or Haikyuu or Kuroko basketball, like have these like huge women audiences. So like, you know, the idea of the authors injecting that kind of subtext there, like, yeah. So in like, you know, reading that into Joe is like, but like, you know, you know, I don't like. Yeah, because like there's it's also at least a love of boxing, you know, if that's what is being said there. But
well, and like there's also a connection to there's another line later with when Yoko like shows up and like she's like looking at Noriko and the other girl whose name I don't remember, the little girl, she's
Noriko, like what's Satoko?
I don't remember.
What is it exactly? I don't remember.
But she's like, oh, look at Yoko's eyes. She's glaring at Noriko. She's clearly fallen for Joe. Those are the eyes of a jealous woman in love. I can tell because I'm a woman. And I'm like, it's played off as a joke, but I'm like, is there a connection here? Like the fact that this side character says something, and it's like a personality trait for the one guy, and like Joe gets his passion for boxing back, and there's like something with a line about Yoko. So it's like, is there supposed to be like a through line here? Am I like conspiracy theory reading a theme into the arc?
You probably have
seen
the image, even if you haven't seen it. But Always Sunny, where there's like there's like a character with like a big old conspiracy board, and he like looks insane. Like you probably seen the image, but yeah, like that's Mathwiz right now. But no, that is interesting because I haven't thought explicitly on the romance in the series, because like Noriko is showing like she's showing romantic interest in Joe, and then so is the little girl, but like. I would, I never thought like, you know, like even Yoko's interest in Joe never seems like romantic, really. Like, even though like that's, you know, like she said that, but like at least outwardly it doesn't seem that way. But it, you know, is there, you know, if you want to read the subtext into it, sure, that's like, you know,
well, but even if it's not like romantic love, like love of something, but I'm like love of boxing, love of what? If, like, love for tomorrow? Like, what is the connection?
If it wasn't like put there, if there's not enough to read into it, like that's still, I don't know, it's just, I just hadn't considered that. Like, even if not this sports series, but what about later sports series, you know, that do that, you know? You know, because because yeah, you're right. Like, you know, Carlos is a playboy kind of, and Joe shows more interest in like Rikishi and Carlos than he does towards Yoko. You know, because people like derogatorily, is that a word? You know, point like with Naruto and Sasuke, you know, that's Naruto, like, you know, but I don't know. Because like again, I wouldn't like, you know, my general stance on shipping is like, you know, if you're putting your ships over the work itself, like I don't really agree with that, because you know you should try, like, it's not your story, but you know, if you want to like fan fiction or fan art or like engage in the ship in that way, go for it, you know. So but no, I hadn't thought about that angle at all, And that's why I guess we went on this tangent, because I just think it's interesting, because that's just a whole you opened a door for me that I never even thought was there. Like you just tap on the wall and like a secret passage opens up. I'm like, what? I didn't think about that. So, weird tangent, and like, I'm not saying, that Joe must be gay for Ricardo. Like, no, that's not, but
I hadn't even been like, I guess like there's a degree to which like I'd considered it, but like not
the way
to
you
that
were
full
framing
extent.
it made me think like you were getting at like the idea of homoerotic subtext, which is why I brought it up. So,
no, but like I do think there, like now that you have gone into that more, it's like I do think there is like, I don't know, it would be interesting like if somebody read that, like. Yeah. If somebody had like a perspective to
and
like,
now I'm wondering, were there female fans at the time, and were that like
and I guess like from my perspective, I also see it as like again, like we've talked about wrestling before, and there's definitely like people will talk about like the homoeroticism of like two sweaty guys beating each other up, and so I guess boxing kind of has that. Anyway, continue your thought.
Yeah, I was just going to ask the question of, like, because it's a popular manga, and everything popular on some level, like, I feel has to have male and female fans, So I'm wondering, like with Gundam, like, apparently this was probably a great generalization, but with the first Gundam series, the director actually allegedly appreciated the female fans more, because they actually cared about the characters, where the boys were more interested in the toys, the mechs, and again, that's probably a pretty strong generalization, and this is also like an older show back when it was airing, so late 70s 80s, but I'm just curious as to like, okay, if there was a notable female audience with Joe, what did they like about it? Did they like Yoko? Did they like Joe? Did they like, maybe were they reading a homoeroticism into it? Like I just have no idea. Like there's this black box of a mystery that I now like I'm kind of curious about, but I don't know how to find it. So
show me the Twitter fan art.
I don't even know when shoujo manga really got like big, or manga for targeted towards girls. Like I know I don't like. I'm assuming there was shoujo manga at this time period. I just I can't name any. Like, how old is Glass Mask? That's like one of the oldest ones I know.
I don't know,
okay,
but
Glass
now
Mask
that we're
was,
on
76, so a few years later. So shoujo manga it definitely existed, but anyway, go on.
Well, I don't know. Now I'm just like, now that we're on the topic of shipping, like I'm generally not much of a shipper, but like if I saw cute fan art on Twitter of these two characters, then I'd be like, you know what? Maybe now I'm a shipper. I don't know.
I wouldn't go that far, but I appreciate seeing cute fan art. Regardless, like, yeah, I'm not, like, again, like I said, my only issue with shipping is when, like with Bleach, like, people who, like, Orihime shouldn't go with Ichigo should have been with Rukia. It's like, well, now you're just, like, getting mad at the story for not doing what you wanted it to do, and, like, I don't think it's a good idea to become really emotionally invested in something you have zero control over, so...
This is another one of the observation I had made earlier, where it's just like, we ended up spending time on this. I didn't realize it would actually spark a discussion. But that's, I don't know. It's interesting. Yeah,
I mean, this applies less to, like, at least last time when we were talking about, like, the real life implications, like, at least that was connected to boxing. This is, like, this has barely as relevance to the show, but I don't know. It's still, like I said, there's a question there that I'm curious about now, but, let's get back to the actual series. Hopefully that people didn't go like, oh, can you stop? No, I refuse. That's the funny part. It's like the homoerotic, but I'm the one who started it. So, like, because you're trans and you're closer to line to these subjects anyways. But so I don't know. I think it's funny that I'm the one who starts it. I don't know. But anyway, Joe does his counter, or his kangaroo punches and his counter to Carlos.
Also, I think it was. Yeah, it was before the start of the exhibition match where Noriko comes in as the second, because Nishi can't make it in. And there's a line of dialogue from like the commissioner people where they're like, "Oh man, are they really planning on using that little girl as a second? Even for a gym as poor, this has got to be breaking some sort of regulation." And it leads to a comment of like, "Oh, making Japanese boxing look like a joke." And to me, like, I don't feel like that's supposed to be taken seriously. Like, to me, it comes off as like funny thing to say, like, after Carlos had been making like a mockery of the top people in Japan through like an act.
You're right.
And
that's a good
everything
contrast of, like...
that the people did to like sabotage Joe. And it's like, oh no, but this is making a mockery about. Okay,
that's an interesting contrast, because it's not very direct, but it's definitely very much kind of ribbing like the horrible sexism, like, sexual, borderline sexual assault. that's fine. You know, boxing isn't ruined for this, but a girl that close to the ring? Horrible. Boxing is ruined. Like, it's so, you're right. I hadn't thought about it like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's definitely because, like, this is clearly an antagonistic character, and, like, you know, Noriko is on the side of the protagonist, so it's definitely, you know, it has that kind of, like, that bit of, like, criticism to it, that it's like, this is really what you're concerned about, huh?
Yeah, and speaking, you know, from a modern perspective, like, obviously during that scene, I'm like, what the fuck, you guys, is she a second, you know, they don't have to, like, the coach is there, you know, she's not even, like, you know, she mostly just has to, like, help with getting water, like, it's not, that aspect isn't super difficult, like, and not to say that, like, yeah, Nishi's more qualified, you know, he's able to weigh in as a boxer, you know, so she's not the best option, but, like, a girl being that close to the ring doesn't ruin boxing, like, what are you talking, like, yeah, it's and obviously their sexism is generally is commented on a lot, or is observed a lot, I should say, because it's not, like, you know, it's not being addressed in, like Yoko's not like, I'll crush the patriarchy, like, she's not, like, you know, that's not a thing that's happening, but it's still very much, like, you know, brought up and painted in a not good light, you know, like I said, Yoko's, like, basically, like, the smartest character in the series, Noriko's a good girl, stop harassing her.
Next
but
time
no, I didn't think about the contrast with Carlos.
Yeah. Next time on the Mathwiz YouTube channel, a feminist analysis of Ashita no Joe. Although, if I ever do get to some of the video ideas I have, now it would be kind of interesting to bring up these characters as, like, historical examples.
Yes, because which is part of the reason we're doing, like, this old school block in the 80s and 90s. Just getting a nice, like, breadth of years, and where, like, most of the series we've talked about, like, Yu Yu Hakusho has been the oldest one up to this point, and then everything else is, like, you know, late 90s, ongoing into the 2000s usually, so you know, which is, you know, important stories, especially for the time period we got into and are discussing, you know, shonen, but also a pretty limited, like, scope, so you know, I do think it's important to go back to, and Joe's a good story. So, you know, it's good manga.
Okay, those were all of my observations before the match actually starts. You can finally talk about it.
I have already mentioned things from the match.
Oh. Oops.
No, it's fine.
This is what happens when, like, you have the whole text in front of you, and I just have, like, the specific pages that I found interesting, so I'm like, wait, did this happen yet? Oh, wait, that happened way back. I gotta mention it.
No, well, yeah, because I mostly just mentioned, like, oh, yeah, Joe, because, like, you know, the fights, you know, Joe does some of his counter moves, and, because, like, the fighting itself is, you know, it's, you know, blow to blow, like, there's generally not a lot to say about the individual beats, like, compared to, like, you know, at least compared to, like, later manga where there's more going on in the fights with, like, powers, and, you know, like, Luffy versus Katakuri, like, every chapter, you know, I had a lot to say, because that's, like, you know, basically my favorite fight ever, but, you know, where these fights aren't as dense, I suppose, if that makes sense.
I did think the ending of the fight was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I was still thinking on that, but go ahead.
Well, for me, it reminded me of, and I don't know if necessarily Dragon Ball referenced this directly, like if that was the inspiration for the thing, but like in the very first Tenkaichi Budokai, where it's the fight between Goku and Roshi disguised as Jackie Chun, you know, it ends with like a double knockout, and it's like, oh, the first person to answer to the count of 10, or, you know, the first person to make it to their feet and then like say a thing is the winner. And so there's like the stakes in, like, oh, they're both down, who's gonna get up first, and like Carlos gets up, and so like Joe tries to get into the ring, but he ends up getting disqualified because Dampé helps him out. And, you know, like for Goku, he stands up and he passes out before he can finish his sentence, and then Roshi gets up and wins. And so it kind of reminded me of that. And, like, I don't know if it was a reference.
I think it's a little different enough to be, like, you know, not a direct reference. Like, there's you know, a few differences, but it's at least the same conceptual, like, concept of just, like, you know, like, yeah, double knockout. Because, like, in this case with boxing, it's just, like, you know, double knockouts are just a thing that happen, you know, or double knockdowns, I should say.
Yeah.
Where obviously with Dragon Ball, it's like a fictional tournament, so Toriyama could, you know, in theory, come up with whatever rules he wants to. So, but no, it's of course, you know, it's Dragon Ball's important story to you, so it makes sense to you to think about it. And it's also super popular in general and well known. But well, because I was thinking, because like obviously Dampé, he helps Joe a bit too much and disqualifies him. Like, that doesn't end the fight, Or it kind of does, like, because like I think how Joe puts it is like since it was an exhibition, like it's you either fight to a draw or one of you gets knocked out. So he's like, well, I can't win because I'm disqualified, but like I could still fight to not lose. Which I thought was, I don't know, it was interesting, I guess, but that's not how it really shapes up because they just decided to do an actual match.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting seeing Joe get disqualified for this. He's like, oh, the fight ended, but it wasn't like, he didn't react negatively like, oh my god, you made me lose, you dumbass. He was just kind of like, yeah, well, this really wouldn't have gone very far anyway.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Well, that like, because I was, I was trying to like frame this, in regards to like, and because like this is the opposite of what Dante did earlier, but it kind of had the same effect. But yeah, you're right. Joe doesn't like get mad at him for it, because at the end of the day, Dante was trying to help him fight, which, compared to Tiger, or, throwing in the towel, like, that's, the opposite of what is, like, so Dante is, like, improved in that regard, but also, like, he got a little excited, and, it's like, and every time I read that, I'm like, Dante, you motherfucker, because it's just, like, there's something frustrating about it, because it's like, Joe's disqualified for something out of his control, but, it turns out alright, so, but anyway, yeah, Yoko gets to, let's do a match in this baseball stadium. Like this, it's like, a match in Japan on a scale that, like, it hasn't been seen before.
Yeah, so for me, I actually did some, I did some research. I looked up 2 Wikipedia articles.
That's twice as many as I did.
Well, wait, but, so you looked up 1?
Yes, I looked up the stadium itself.
Oh, okay. Well, because when you said twice, I was like, well, if you looked up 0, then that's not technically... I am the math whiz, so I have to call that out. Anyways, as for the stadium, I had heard this, and like I've heard of... I'm probably butchering the pronunciation, but I've always heard it pronounced as Kurikan Hall. But this is not what that was. This is a Kurikan Baseball Stadium. So for me, my first thought was like, oh, big stadium, the Tokyo Dome. I wonder if the Tokyo Dome had been built when Joe was written. And it had not. It was not built until the 80s, like the mid-late 80s, which was... So basically, this was the predecessor to the Tokyo Dome.
Gotcha. So this would have been the biggest one at the time, basically,
yes.
Is what you're saying. Or at least one of the biggest ones.
It was just... It was something that, like, I don't know. It put in perspective.
Okay, see, I didn't know that there was
it's easier for me to conceptualize, like, the scale of this. Because if it's, like, the biggest thing in Japan, it's like, oh, so it's basically like a, like a more, before the Tokyo Dome, there was this. And I'm like, oh, okay, so it's that big of a scale. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what I was, wait, so you said the Korakuen Hall and the Korakuen Baseball Stadium are 2 different places?
Yeah, because I'm familiar with Kurikan Hall for, like, wrestling stuff, but it's got boxing roots as well.
Okay. Well,
it's
like,
definitely a thing.
I don't know what it's called, but apparently, like, there's a place where because baseball is really big in Japan. And, there's one baseball stadium that, like, apparently, like, when the players are there, they will take some of the dirt home as a souvenir because so few, like, players go onto this, like, sacred ground. And I was like, well, what was that one called? And I couldn't find it, but I don't think it's this one because this one was
this one was demolished.
Yes, right. Right. So I was just is it like, so I don't know when, like, I don't remember what the name of the famous one is called, but it wasn't this one because it's still there, I expect. So yeah, that was a little off topic. We can't stop.
Well, I don't know. I thought it was like, it's at least relevant to the, I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's fair. It is funny that we both did, like, you were like, wait, Craftsdwarf did research too. Like, oh yeah, and then building up to the next match, there's more of the, kind of tension build up. Like this time, Carlos will turn the rope into an iron bar. And then we get a fun scene where, there's some foreigner at the park. And and it's like, it's nice because Carlos is like much more like, Carlos is kind of like a picture of like what Joe might be in the future as a boxer, still himself, like, because Carlos is like, here he is, reminded of his own time in the slums like Joe, and like he literally just gave everyone a bunch of stuff, and because now he has, and he's just like, he has enough that he can freely, like, here, have some toys, have some but and then he just plays him songs. Like, I don't know, Carlos is a nice guy when he's not sleazing on women.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole bit where he's like, I don't want your gifts, and Dante's like, okay, I'll take them, and then that doesn't last. But yeah, they do get into a sparring match, but it doesn't, like, once Joe gets on the ropes, they're like, okay, yeah, I'll show you I'll use my tactic when in the actual match. Oh yeah, I forgot that, Joe also mentions that, like, Carlos he still hasn't even used it, like, I think he's only operating at, like, 80%, like, he just kind of recognizes that Carlos still hasn't gone all out. Which is like, as if Carlos needed more build-up to how strong he was.
Yeah.
Anyway, before there's also another part where, like, he's talking to Yoko, and they're like, oh, I can see, Joe's bloody body lying in front of me right now, and laughing. Like, his show buddy confidence is kind of, like, returned. Now he's got his, like, tactic, I guess.
Well, yeah, like, there's a whole conversation where he's basically like, oh, I did all of this to, at first it seems, because how we are presented it is, like, he just comes in to kind of, like, do this show for Yoko, or, like, Yoko brings him in, and she's very much, like, in control of, like, she's very much in on the act, and the whole thing is like, oh, we're going to ensnare Joe, and we're going to get him back into boxing. But then it turns out here that he's like, oh, no, the whole plan was to get the fights with the champ, but then, like, get this big fight with this outside boxer, or maybe that wasn't the plan originally, but, like, they encountered him and they're like, oh, we can make this bigger. We can get this big fight at this baseball stadium, and then after that, the champ is going to be interested because, oh, the 6th ranked boxer in the world is struggling against some unranked fighter. And so it very much seems to be, and Yoko's like, bring up all these things like, oh, but what about that time? Oh, but what about this time? Or, she's like, you were really acting that whole time? And she's like, I don't know. So it's now at the point where, like, her plan has kind of, like, gotten out of her hands.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, because, like, the interests have kind of, like, because, yeah, she was basically, Carlos was a part of this manipulation of hers, but now his interests and, things are not quite aligning. So, but I mean, at the end of the day, it worked and Joe's back. But yeah, there's still, like, a little bit of unalignment there. And of course, Yoko's worried, like, oh shit, am I luring Yabuki Joe into his grave? Because now they're in the expedition match, they were using 6-ounce gloves, which I did get my question answered, which is, how could I not remember it, even though this is now my 3rd time reading it. But because Joe describes the 16-ounce gloves as, like, he's got pillows on his hands, so it's like, yeah, the extra padding is heavier, but it's also more cushioned. So which that answers, because I was wondering, like, why are the heavier gloves weaker? But there we go. Because now they're using, like, regular gloves, so there's no handicap. They're just they're gonna be at their peak.
There was also there is we responded to that comment earlier about, like, the potential dangers
the risks,
of boxing, and there's specifically a comment kind of tying into the sentiment we had talked about earlier, where, like, they're talking about, like, the graceful panther of Venezuela versus the wild dog of Japan. In here it's brought up as, like, oh, it's taking place in the middle of a modern city, which is, like, supposed to because, like, in Japanese culture specifically, this would definitely stand out. Okay, so especially with, like, how Japanese culture, at least as it's been described to me, is painted, is like, you get out of high school and you go into your career path, and that's basically it. Like, that's your life from that point on. And so thinking about it from that perspective, where boxing is, like, this opportunity to, let those primal urges out, and these people can just fight like animals and really just let loose.
Yeah.
That, which I only just realized now, is really interesting.
That makes sense. Well, and that also fits with pro wrestling, too, where, like, because that was also really popular around this time period, where just, like, taking enjoyment in these more, like, animalistic, visceral, kind of, like, brutal,
and
things
especially
as
thinking
reserved, constraint,
and Japanese pro wrestling specifically definitely has more described as, like, strong style. It's very much more physical, and the hits are a lot more, like, there's more, like, it's more physical, it's more, like, forceful, so it definitely also has that edge of being very primal and animalistic in that sense.
Like, and what you made me think of, even Joe being a delinquent who becomes a boxer, like that, like, because there's a lot of delinquent manga, especially in like the 80s and 90s, like or even Yusuke, the Jotaro from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 3, Rokunashi Blues, we had mentioned the main character, and of course Joe. Like, basically, as I understand it, like, yeah, Japanese, like, so there, at least, I don't know if it's still the case, and if it isn't the case, that would make sense, because there do seem to be less delinquent manga today. But basically, how it works in Japan, as I understood it, or did, is that your permanent record wouldn't become permanent until you're like 20 or something like that. So as a basically, if you're in high school and you're doing like petty crimes, it's not like, it's still obviously it's still bad, but it's not like damning, which isn't the case as an adult, where like if erased, like I think the pause and select video on erased, where the justice system is very harsh. So as a result, like I think a statistic I remember was like basically like there's like 5 times as many arrests for teenagers as there are adults in Japan. Like, huge difference. And part of that is basically the idea, like, as I sort of understood it framed, like, I'll try and link the article actually, which wasn't specifically on this, but these were just some things mentioned that I thought were interesting. And one of them is like, basically, like, delinquency in Japan is like, it's like a youthful non-conformity in a conforming society, and then that it's something that they eventually grow out of it, so like the idea is like, so maybe on some level it's sort of like, like obviously it's not looked on highly, but it's still on some level more like again, like with or at least at this at a time it was allowed, because like they get it out of their system and then they go into society. So like, and then here you have boxing as a path for that, like like they're the non-conforming delinquents, and then they get their shit figured out basically through boxing, to grow up properly and enter the world properly. So yeah, so that you just made me think of that as like, again, where the like boxing, I hadn't thought about boxing itself as like something, it's still within a rule set, but it is still very much like, not it's more unrestrained compared to like a salaryman workplace, that something like that. So
I had also definitely, and I don't know if this is commented on as much. Like, I don't know if it's ever stated outright that, like, this foreigner is coming in, and Joe, the natural Japanese guy, is we're cheering him on, because it definitely seemed like it was more of like a split. People were cheering for Carlos. So initially, when I had read this little comment, I had thought like my first connotation was nationalism, and I'm like, but like for the time period, I had thought of it as like, considering it in the context of like, it's post World War II Japan, people empathizing with like the underdog story of like rising from nothing and becoming greatness. And so like when I had seen that line of like the graceful panther of Venezuela versus the wild dog of Japan, I had considered that context, and I was like, oh, okay, so is that also like kind of playing into the big marketing of the match, in a way? Like, obviously, it's not like, it's not stated outright, like, and people who have recovered from World War II, and this is what, but, like, touching at that theme, I guess.
No, absolutely, yeah. Because, like, the way you said it, like, yeah, even the graceful panther, like, that's a more, like, positive line than wild dog, so.
Yeah. So I don't think it's quite doing that, but.
Yeah, no, it's still worth considering, because, yeah, I do think, like, yeah, it managed, because there's more, I almost said minorities, that's not right. Well, I guess in Japan it's accurate, but foreigners is just more accurate to what we're discussing. But, like, it manages to do a good job at, like, framing them as, like, flawed characters without, like, there's one we'll talk about, but, so maybe I should drop this line of subject matter for next time, because, okay, next one's gonna be, like, 4 hours long, because it's the longest stretch of reading, and it's also the end of the manga, so, but we'll get there.
I'm also looking at the cutaways to Yoko in the build-up to this match, and, there's more talking about, like, she's a woman in a man's world, has she delved too deep? But I do feel like there's also a degree to which, with the narrative being about boxing and very much, like, all this talk about being a man's world, it does also, like, you could potentially read it from, like, a toxic masculinity lens. So, like, there's a degree to which, I wonder if there's not, like, she has that outsider perspective of, like, look at what you people are, like, look at what you guys are doing to yourselves. And so, like, she kind of has that fear and, like, that alienation. So, like, I don't know. That's also, like, part of the connotation I get from people talking about, like, like a woman shouldn't have this place or feminine weakness or whatever. So like, I don't know. It's definitely something where like I tend to not throw these scenes out wholesale, just as like, oh, misogyny, because like, I don't know. I feel like there's also like that undercurrent, which is like, there's more to this than just that. Also, there's a funny panel of her eyes on the ring, and I'm like, Ring-chan, like, this is funny. Like, why her face is just on the mat of the ring, and I'm like, why is this here? Like, that was my first thought. It's like, this looks kind of meme-ish.
It does. I mean, on one hand,
I get it. Like, it's not actually. I'm not writing it off totally as a joke, but my first thought was a joke.
I do look at it like on something like, it's an absurd looking like panel, but you know, at this, like, because I guess
it's more like thinking of it in terms of modern anime culture when this came out in like the 60s,
where they just put a cute face on everything.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a bit of postmodernism, kind of like, oh, this is weird, because like obviously, like, why would it be drawn this way? Like, I guess the idea is that like Yoko is the ring, she's the reason that they're here, so it's like literally framing Yoko as the ring.
Yeah, like her being her being the devil that like
fault.
led, like she's the one dragging Joe to hell, and so like she made this grave for him, and that's what the visual is with her eyes on the ring. Like she created this.
I forget when that line was said, but I really love the line where Joe just she's like, you're a devil, but who looks like an angel to me. Where it's like what she's doing is manipulative and cruel. You could say again in regards to like boxing and the harm, but that's what Joe wants. So even though like he knows that what she's doing isn't necessarily the best thing for the best intent, but like it's what he wants, so he's like, well, you're a devil that looks like an angel to me. So and then
immediately after that, she does like her glare, and he's like, "Yep, that's it. Don't glare at me with such cunning eyes."
They're so good.
Yeah, their dynamic is a very strong aspect of the manga.
So anyway, on to the full match, which definitely has some things to mention.
I could even die with a smile now.
Oh, like Rikishi. Oh no.
Oh no, not that smile.
I guess just to do the usual, like, I'll start talking and maybe you'll think of something that you want to say. This is where the realism gets a little like, okay, maybe not, where it's like just the rope shenanigans just get like a little like, this is where I just start to go, okay, like, because Joe, like, they're like, he develops the counter on the spot where he like drops down onto the ropes and does like a frog punch and just like shoots up.
Yeah, it's like in the video games where you hit like the spring and you just shoot into the air, but he's got like the power uppercut.
Yeah, and at this point it's like very much like looking into like, oh, maybe like the what could be possible in boxing, but obviously is not practical, or like like maybe it would be possible if you like practice it, but it's exaggerated. It's fine, but I just, because otherwise, like, aside from stuff like some moments like this, the manga, like I said, it's pretty grounded overall. Like, it's at least compared to anything else we've read on the Nen Show for sure. But so I always just like when that part happens of just like, and even Carlos like grabbing onto the rope is a little like, okay. Though also like, since we were talking about, I wonder, because you were saying like there's like iron cables in the ropes, so I'm wondering if like these different.
Well, I specifically just said metal, like, because I'm not sure what specific kind. Like, I think if I was gonna say anything, my guess would have been steel. But I don't. I don't know metals, so I'm just like, yeah, it's just there's something, not rubber there.
Right, but the way that they're like, I'm wondering if I would hope that the author has like been in a boxing, because like I know with Ippo. The George Morikawa, like, he owns I mean, I don't know if he owns a boxing gym, but he's physically fit and he knows boxing. Like, I don't know if he's actually like professionally boxed, but he's much closer. So, but I don't know about Chiba or Kajiwara. I think I don't know about their history with boxing. So maybe the ropes aren't different. Maybe they're not drawn that way because like I don't know. It's just like, it's hard to imagine the way the rope stuff happens. I'm like, is there really metal in those? Like, which goes back to like why I was so surprised that you gave me that bit of information, because like, I mean, manga isn't a very good perspective to learn about anything real. But seeing how all this stuff, I'm like, is there like, they look like bungee, like rubber bands almost. They're very elastic. So like, again, it's not a fault of the manga. It's just, again, me trying to explain my perspective. And
yeah, because like from what I understand of like how people will set up a ring, like the reason they have like the four corners there is because like they will like tie or I don't know, with whatever like cable they have, they will like tighten it or loosen it through like where it's connected at the post, and that's how like they make it so that it's like not too taut or not too the opposite of taut, because I forget what that means.
Loose or taut, yeah. Because taut is like tightened. So.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I was like, wait, does it mean the other thing?
No, that's like specific knowledge I had because I had a conversation with it like around high school, and that's just one of the random things that just stick with you for no reason, and you're like, yeah.
Yeah, but this match definitely has like an ominous aura going into it, because like you've got Joe talking about like, oh, I could die with a smile now, and you've got and there's obviously all the setup before with like, oh, Rikishi, the punch that killed Rikishi, yes. I have to threaten this guy's life for him to take me seriously, and it's like, please, both of you live, none of you die, stay alive, and please.
Especially like they've shown that like, yes, Chiba is willing to kill off characters even if they are alike.
Yeah.
So there's definitely like Carlos could have a bad end here. Or Joe might, get like all bets are off. But luckily it turns out relatively well, but we'll talk about that because it doesn't turn out perfectly by any stretch. But anyway, yeah, they keep going at it. And it gets to the points where, like I think, because it's kind of interesting how it winds down, because, like, there is no winner, and that's still, like, it's interesting, because of the Rikishi parallels, where before, like, Joe outright lost, and then Rikishi died, so he can never beat him again.
Yeah.
But here, it's like, there's no clear winner, so it's more of a draw, a stalemate, because they both, like, they throw out the rules, and then just go at each other. They're just, like, this is Carlos's pine-scented ring, where they're just fighting. Like, boxing isn't even a thing anymore. It's just a fight, where they happen to be wearing boxing gloves and be in a boxing ring, more or less. And, like, the one announcer is even like, even though they're throwing out the rules, I'm absorbed. Like, there's a purity to it, almost. Like, this is what, like, it's like, even though the rules don't fit it, they almost, like, get at the spirit of boxing in a way that the rules could never possibly,
Yeah. Yeah, and it even comes up later about, Joe has the line, to fight like that on the ring with gloves stained with blood and sweat is to become closer than friends who've shared a million words together. And so, like, yeah, it's really, like, just two guys going out there, beating the piss out of each other, and, just, like, forming, like, this unbreakable bond through this, like, battle. Like, they're just going out there, fuck everything, fuck the rules, just go out there, and they're just, like, beating the shit out of each other, because, like, that's... like calling back to their origins, both kind of growing up on the streets, and
like even notes
it's beautiful.
And even mentions like they have never really talked a lot, like they but they still know each other really. And I
see, this is where like maybe that's where like the idea of like love and passion kind of like ties into it, because it's like these two people like really just like putting their all into this match and just like going out there and like. You could say, like, leaving their heart and soul out there in the ring, just going out and really, like, this is why they love boxing. And so, like, the fact that it, like, hits at the core of boxing while also throwing the rules out, it like, captures the spirit. Maybe that's where, like, the idea of, like, love comes in.
Yeah, because, it's interesting. But what I was going to say, because I was just, it's not even directly related to this, because, like, Joe understands Carlos, like, they understand each other well and have this connection after fighting like this. And I was just thinking, like, okay, who are the characters in the series who understand Joe the most? Because he spends the most time with Nishi and Danpei, but they don't really understand him in the same way, because they're always trying to, like, they're worried about his safety, and they're trying to keep, but that's not Joe. But the characters who understand the most are Rikishi, Carlos, and Yoko. And that's interesting, because, like... Because she's not a boxer, but she's still, like... And I'd argue that it's because they're very similar, even though they come from these completely different walks of life, they're completely, like... She's not a boxer, she's just, like, related to boxing, and, he's, so... But they're still similar, and they still understand... And I'm wondering if, like, that's part of the reason why they're... Because I think for both of us, like, their relationship is probably the most interesting one in the manga.
Yeah, definitely. Especially considering, like, where it started and how far it has come. Like, before Yoko... was like looking down on Joe, like, oh, he's this thug, she's this rich girl, she like makes these donations and like shows up to the prison to like, like she's doing a good deed, but is her heart fully in it? And then like he challenges that, and like through boxing he rises and falls, and she now is like looking at that, and instead of being like, oh, look at this thug, this violence, I can't take this, she's like, no, I have to be here because like this is, you know, the wild animal that Joe is. Like this is more true to who Joe is than the pitiful display before. Like, so now it's, you know, even if she's like trying to leave because of the violence, like, oh, it's too much. Before it was like, she didn't have the investment in boxing, but now it's like the violence is too much because she cares about the people involved and like the,
yes.
I think.
No, well, you just made me. I realized something, because you remember way back when, like when Joe was arguing with Yoko, and he's like, "You're just doing this for you. You know, you're not legitimately trying to help us. You're just doing it for your feelings." And she gets that.
And now she's doing it for Joe.
That's what I was about to say. Because when she's leaving the boxing ring because she can't bear to watch, she's doing that for herself. And Joe called her out on that. So the fact that she's able to look now, even though she hates it, even though she doesn't like watching this violence, the fact that she's able to put that aside for these people, I think shows a growth on her part, because she's able to do something she doesn't want to do for the people that she's involving herself with.
Yeah.
And I only just had that realization because of what you were saying, and I'm like, yes, Yoko's so good.
Yeah, she's probably my favorite character. Yeah, I think
she'll surpass Joe at this rate, because holy shit, she's so good. Because Joe, it's hard. I don't know. Maybe I'm at the point where I can't really separate them anymore, because they're so like the comparison and contrast between them is also like great for both of them. They're good.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. I totally forgot. But I see a line of dialogue about a mouthpiece, and I totally forgot the when Carlos knocks out Tiger Ozaki and like his mouthpiece flies up and hits the spotlight. That was just so to really like convey the force of it. That was just like so over the top. I loved it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I'm thinking like, could I even like throw it in an accurate hit a spotlight? Like this is Carlos like
punching it out of the gut. Like the force of his punch was so much. Not only that it knocked the mouthpiece out, but that it knocked it up to the ceiling, hit the spotlight.
Jesus Christ, like some fucking janitor had to go up there with a ladder to wipe off the blood and spit, and I'm just like, man, that poor dude. Like, no, that's, yeah, but anyway, we're almost done. We only have a few pages left, so, yeah, Carlos heads off, the uncrowned emperor, to go fight Jose Mendoza, the champion.
And he's looking for Joe, and he can't find Joe, but Joe is there.
Yep, and then...
he falls up the stairs.
Yes,
and,
which is...
I don't remember his name. Roger.
Robert.
No, Robert. I was about to be like Randy. I don't know.
Roger Smith, 2004. Wait, no.
What are you doing here? This isn't a 2004 manga. But yeah, and then Robert knows. He's just like, oh no, this is over. That's it. It's done.
Yep. Yeah,
so it's better than him being outright dead. Maybe he'll come back later. I don't know what happens. But yeah,
Carlos is not dead. I will say he shows up in some capacity, but would hope. We'll see.
But yeah, like it's in the same consequence of like fighting Joe. It takes something out of you. If it's not your life, it's for Carlos, he's basically done boxing. It seems like he's lost that. I don't know. The injuries are too severe. He'll never be the same again.
Yeah, well, that's like literally what happens at like the very end is we're almost there. We're almost there. So
yeah, as soon as like the scene started where Yoko's like, "Oh, I'm waiting on a fax about the results of the fight," I'm like, this is not gonna be good news.
Yep, and then it was especially because you're like, well, because I try to leave off on little cliffhangers, which are because like I think I've ended off in good places, like before, Joe's kind of coming back from Rikishi, but oh no, he's not back yet. Now here it's like like we just had this whole big arc with Carlos, and then nope, Carlos was defeated. He was a jobber the whole time.
Oh,
like even after all this build up, he got which is. Because but anyway, Joe goes to see Yoko. The scene I mentioned before happens where she tries to pay him extra and he denies her, and like he only wants what he deserves. Like he's not a fan of her richness in general, so he just like he throws her good gesture out and is like, just give what we agreed, no more no less. And then we find out the results of Carlos's battle with Jose Mendoza, and he was knocked out in the first round, allegedly because he was already like, well, because there's a part where like Joe even mentions that he's like kind of a husk, like he's looking at the flame of a lamp, which is a really ominous image. But then we find out that what Robert said is that Yabuki Joe turned Carlos into a hunk of scrap, and now he's irreversibly crippled from his fight with Jose Mendoza, and that's where it ends off.
Yeah, the way it was specifically phrased of like Jose Mendoza didn't beat Carlos. I don't remember his last name either.
Jose Mendoza is correct. Oh, Carlos Rivera is that what you meant?
Yeah. So it was like Jose Mendoza didn't beat Carlos Rivera. Carlos Rivera was broken by Joe.
Yeah. Ooh. So yeah, that about covers it for our third reading, which is next one is going to be the longest one because we're reading the rest of the manga, which has at least 3 major fights. Like, though one of them definitely is more to lead into the final one, but another one is like an arc in itself. But I do think it's we're probably going to talk next. Like, I didn't expect to get over 2 hours out of this one. To be honest, like we've been reading, I'm like, yeah, this is good, but I don't know about discussion worthy. We did have some weird tangents. My fault. Next time, more homoeroticism in Joe. I'm sorry.
It was a really interesting. It was a really interesting arc. Yeah, I mean, like Carlos is a really good. He definitely is like, as far as like the performativism of like boxing, he's definitely like the heel. He's very charismatic. He's very, he's very much like the way he handles him. The way he's very precise with his boxing, but also like his acting and pulling out. The puppet master pulling the strings
even, like,
in a way.
Yeah, the hitting on girls kind of makes him more like a heel. Yeah, I didn't think about that. But at the same time, there's a likability to him too. So
yeah, he's a really strong character, and I definitely think like, where does the story go after Rikishi? He was a very good, very good follow up. Like, I don't know, like I definitely think like he's up there in like my favorite characters, because he has a real presence to him.
I'm glad to hear that, because like I said, once I saw him hitting on girls, I'm like, oh, Mathwiz is gonna love this. Like,
you underestimate me.
And yeah, I just like, yeah, Carlos is really good. And like, though, I don't know, thinking about later stuff, I'm like, but Carlos is good. But
I think it was also interesting from like the structure of the story. This was the first time that we really were able to pull away from Joe and kind of focus on someone else's fights, and like that's kind of what's driving the story.
True.
Like with Rikishi gone and nothing driving Joe, someone else has to kind of take the reins for a bit, and that is what brings Joe back.
Exactly.
Sort of.
Yeah, that's
not
a good
that
point.
Carlos ever becomes like the main character, but he does get more spotlight. Not that Rikishi hadn't had fights where he was the focal character, but Carlos has like a little mini arc to it.
Right, he has his own almost inverse struggle to Joe, where Joe's like struggling to fight in the first place. Carlos is struggling to fight because he's too good. Where Joe's struggling to fight because he's suffering and still trying to overcome this trauma. But it's good stuff. Joe's good manga. I like it a lot. So yeah. Anyway, next time, as I said, we're reading from where this one left off, which was volume 14, page 81 or 82 rather, to the end of volume 20. So that's gonna be like 6.5 volumes. So gonna be a long one. And then oh yeah, the Shabe's Caribou-kun gave us like his like how he'd like divide the arcs, and I might use that because saying fights is one thing, but like some fights that like Tiger and all these the 3 minor boxers here, the top ranking bantamweight ones, like they're like we're not gonna consider those the best fights in the manga, but they all do feed into they're Carlos's arc, so
yeah.
But yeah, But yeah, so anyway, thank you for listening. Hope you didn't mind the tangents, but at the same time, if you didn't mind the we spent half an hour minutes on like transgender in several both the Yu Hakusho and I'm sure we talked about a lot in Hunter x Hunter too, without when Alika shut up. So I don't know. I like the discussions. I thought it was a good discussion. No,
I think I think that's also part of like the appeal of like a podcast is that sometimes things will break off into things that are tangentially, subjects. We talk about anime and manga. So like, when are we ever going to talk about this topic? The podcast kind of give a way to kind of how that relates to, like, unless you've seen, like, my wrestling videos, like, when am I ever going to get to flex some of my wrestling knowledge? So, like, this is a good opportunity to kind of, like, bring that in.
And that's what I like about, because it's like, it is, sometimes maybe a little less or more, but it is relevant, and, like, so as long as we're not repeating the same things again and again, which I think we've been pretty good about, like, this podcast is spaced across enough time. Like, I would have had no perspective on Gundam if we watched it, like, if we did this podcast a year ago, because I hadn't touched it. But now I've watched 2 whole series, so... Well, actually, no, 2.5, because I forgot I did watch Iron Blooded Orphans, the first half. But now we're getting really off topic, so... but anyway, thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.